It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Yo, hopefully you guys are doing well. I am back in studio today. I know that a lot of people enjoyed the in-field live streams, but let me tell you, they're pretty stressful, especially for me after the fact, because I have such a hard time when there's audio issues. Like I I really stress about poor audio quality. And I know my stuff is not amazing, but in general, you know, I love the studio feel of the live streams. But I get that, you know, people like to see different things. So I'll try to do more of those. You know, now that I know it's an option, I'm just still trying to dial in the microphone setup. So I've tried 2 different microphone setups, and I'm not satisfied whatsoever with the microphone setups that I've done. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm still trying to figure it out. I mean, I've gone as far as getting a headset, but I don't want to get a headset. And when you're on Bluetooth, one of the problems that you run into with audio is there's a lag. So there's like a 2 to 3 second, well, probably 2 second lag on Bluetooth. So if you were looking at my face, you know, I'd be like a, what was I going to say? Like a Bruce Lee, Bruce Lee, you know, kung fu movie or something like that, where it's dubbed. You wouldn't be able to, it would just drive people crazy. And, you know, now I know the audio is cool. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, I really appreciate you guys making it in here. So let's start this off right. My name is Chris. I'm just an HVACR service technician. You know, there's a lot of new viewers that have been coming into this channel. So I'm sure there's going to be some new people watching this stream. The whole point of these live streams is to answer questions. Jack, thank you so very much for that super chat. That's awesome, bud. I really appreciate it. So the whole point of these live streams is to answer questions, okay? This channel has grown into a monster that I never expected it to grow into, and it's insane the amount of emails. I was just talking to my wife today before the stream, the amount of emails, the comments, the Facebook comments, all these different things that come through, and it's like I try to get to everything, but it's so overwhelming. So I started doing these live streams as a way to kind of consolidate the questions, but it's even gone beyond that, because when I started these live streams, there was like 30 people, 20 people watching, you know, and you know, it's crazy. It's just, it's very humbling, but it's just insane. Like there's so many unanswered comments that I can't get to, and I feel bad. I try to read every one, but I just can't get to them all. But the whole point of these streams was to be able to kind of consolidate the questions, answer them in a live format, and then also answer live questions from the chat, okay? So again, I already covered the fact that my name is Chris. I'm just an HVAC service technician, run a small business here in Southern California. We work on restaurant refrigeration. HVACR Wiz, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. So run a small air conditioning and refrigeration company that deals with mainly restaurant refrigeration out here in Southern California. And yeah, I just make these YouTube videos in general. They started out as helping my employees, but it's morphed into something totally different. Dion, thank you so very much, man. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, exactly. So that last live stream, Dion, John, thank you so very much. You guys are awesome with these super chats. Again, you guys don't have to do this, but they're very much appreciated, okay? So yeah, the last live stream, yeah, I realized it made for a good service call kind of a thing, you know, seeing that stuff pop up. But yeah, it was fun after the fact. They're always cool to think after the fact, like, hey, that one went okay. But in the midst of it, you know, I put so much time into getting ready for these streams to be just, you know, totally thrown off balance and have to go do a call just kind of threw me off that day. So, but anyways, I really appreciate you guys. I got a whole list of questions here that I want to get to. I have a topic that I wanted to start off with, and I just want to preface this whole stream and in general, the whole YouTube channel. Okay, I am not a perfect person. I make mistakes every single day. In fact, I make mistakes and I admittedly show them in my videos all the time. People call me out for my mistakes. I am totally accepting of criticism. If you guys see anything in my videos that you think is incorrect, shoot me an email, send me a comment, leave a comment on YouTube, Facebook, whatever, okay? You can find me on all the social media platforms under HVACR videos. But yeah, I'm always willing to accept criticism, but I definitely am not a perfect person, nor will I ever be. And there is not a perfect service technician out there. So if someone's telling you they're perfect, they're full of smoke, okay? It's just not true. I try to share my mistakes as much as possible, but I am human, okay? Yeah, and I just, you know, I try to be as open as possible with you guys, all right? So, you know, with HVACR, especially refrigeration in general, okay, I deal with restaurants. It is not as demanding as supermarket work, but the restaurant work is pretty unpredictable, meaning that, you know, I can get a service call and I have to drop everything and go take care of that service call. I typically try to give my customers a 2-hour response time. So I try to be within the call within 2 hours. Most of the time I'm there within 45 minutes, try to get out there and, you know, figure out what's going on. The way that I think about service calls, for instance, last week when I was getting ready for my live stream, I got off work early. I was sitting in my office. I was getting ready, sending emails, coming up with a list of things to talk about. and I got a service call about 3:45 or something like that. Jack, thank you so very much. I really appreciate that super chat. So yeah, I got a service call and I had to leave. It was a walk-in freezer. Now, yes, I probably could have gone ahead and went through with my in-studio stream and then gone to the service call after, but I get like all bent up inside, and the anxiety inside of me just kind of builds up, and it's like I just want to get out there, get the call done with, and get home. Okay, I don't like to drag things on. You know, if I would have waited for the 2 hours that I would have done a stream for, then I would have been home 2 hours later that night, and it would have just thrown off my next day. HVAC is very unpredictable, especially when you're doing the refrigeration stuff, okay? And it's just one of those things you have to learn to deal with. Now, we have an on-call rotation. I've been getting a lot of questions about that. We have an on-call rotation at my company. We're short a service technician right now because he's injured. But anyways, he'll be back soon, hopefully. But so at this time right now, we have a 5-week rotation at my company, okay? And I'm on 4 weeks in a row, and I get 1 week off. Okay, so I'm on call 4 weeks. I get 1 week off. On call 4 weeks. You know, we were already short a service technician when the one guy got injured. So that's just how it happens. And he didn't injure himself on the job. He injured himself on his personal time, but he's going to be okay. So just has to kind of do some stuff to get back into shape, basically. So, but it's very unpredictable, okay? It's very rewarding because I very much enjoy fixing things. I love the feeling of being able to walk away from something and be done with it and get it done. But at the same time, it's stressful because you just don't know when the calls are going to come in. And it does make for one of those really awkward situations where when I'm on call, I do not plan anything. For instance, my wife literally just came to me today. Alex, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. That's really awesome. And I'm not a hero by any means, okay? But, you know, with my wife, she asked me today, she says, hey, a friend of ours is having a birthday party next weekend on Sunday, and she was kind of curious what I thought about going to the party, and I just told her I'm on call. I'm not planning. I'm not going to go to the party. I'm not going to drive my work van to the party because I'm destined to get a service call, basically, okay? I shouldn't say I'm not going to go. I'll feel out the weekend and kind of see how it's going, and then come Sunday, you know, maybe I might go, but I don't like to plan things like that. I don't like to get my hopes up. So when I'm on call, I typically don't plan a single thing. I just stay at home, do stuff around the house, because I know that if I get my hopes up and go out to dinner or do something, that I'm destined to get a call, and it's going to ruin my night even more so than just, you know, feeling like crap because I'm staying at home doing nothing. And yeah, that may sound horrible, but that's just the way that I roll. So I'm going to pay attention to the chat here real quick and see what that have. Does that affect me hiring techs? Also, when am I going to be on HVAC radio? Actually, real good point, Ernesto. So HVAC radio is a couple, well, one of my friends, Ruben Macias, Rookie Refrigeration, is doing a podcast with Ulysses Palacios. I believe that's how you pronounce your name, Ulysses. It's called HVAC Radio. Guys, check it out on Spotify, on the Apple Store, anything like that. I think it's their 3rd episode today, and they were talking about glycol chillers. I listened to that. That was really cool. The other 2 guys, forgive me, I don't personally know you guys. I know one of them's name's Cameron, and the other one, your name is slipping my tongue right now, but I apologize. But yeah, they had mentioned something about me going on the show. I'm really interested. I'm sure they'll call me one of these days. Nate Peterson, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. That is flipping awesome. I really appreciate it. You guys definitely don't have to do these. But Ernesto, I don't know what you mean by does that affect hiring other techs? I don't know what you mean by that one. Give me some more context on that question. Let me see what else. Yeah, exactly. Okay. So let me see what else we got in here. Guys, if you do have questions, do me a favor, post them in the chat, put them in caps lock. Okay, that's the reason why questions are in caps lock, because then that way we know it's an actual conversation or a question for me. If I don't answer your question right away, just keep posting them until myself or one of the moderators tells you not to post it anymore, okay? I try to get to them, and if I miss your guys' questions, send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, okay? Can I use an automotive belt on an HVAC unit? Kevin, I have done it before. Yes, it'll get you by, depending on the size of the belt. Sometimes they may be a little bit thinner, a little bit thicker, but it'll get you by until you can get a proper V-belt for it. So let's see what else. Are condenser fan motors made in China? Electrically minded MK. I don't know. I know a lot of the motors that I deal with are made in Mexico. I don't know how many of them are made in China, but I can pretty much guarantee you majority of them are not made in the United States, and that's just a sad fact of it. So there's a few motor manufacturers, but not very many. So most, I would say, are made in Mexico or possibly China. Kevin, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. I really appreciate it, okay? Let's see. Yeah, live stream service calls. They are awesome after the fact. They're a little stressful during the thing. Will I at some point hire enough techs to only be on call 1 week? That is the goal, Daniel. But at the same time, as an owner, I have to weigh out all the things right now. And, I'm looking probably to hire one service technician right now. I haven't decided if they're going to be an experienced or non-experienced. Of course, I want to hire experienced, but it's been hard to find an experienced tech that is in my area that wants to work for me. I am hiring, though. I possibly will consider doing an apprenticeship, but the problem with the apprenticeship, the difficult thing about me hiring an apprentice and training him, I want to do it, and I realize that'll help the industry, but the problem with it is I have to commit to working with that guy 40 hours a week to give him his 40. So it just gets to be a little difficult, because sometimes I need to get off early to come do the live streams, or I got to work in the office or things like that. So then I have to put him with a less experienced tech, which I'm not a super fan of. So it's just the struggles. But then also I got to weigh out the whole COVID thing. Everything's so unpredictable right now. Are we going to lock down again? Are we going to get busy? Are we going to stay slow? You got to be careful. I don't want to hire a bunch of people and then have to lay them off or something like that. Okay. So we just got to kind of be a little conservative with our hiring. But I'm definitely going to be hiring one person at least right now. So let me see what else we got in here. The super chats, Adam, thank you very much, man. I really appreciate it, bud. Yeah, I will be there, work permitting, on the HVAC overtime on Friday. So this last weekend was my one weekend off. I ended up working on Saturday. That's how it works. I wasn't on call this last weekend, but I ended up running a call. Or not a call. I ended up doing a scheduled job all day Saturday. So I went in at I got to the job site at 7, and then I got home at 4:30 or something like that. Did a leak repair and just a whole thing. I filmed a video on it, so it'll pop up eventually. But, so even when I'm not on call, I'm working all the time. Now, I did take Sunday. Sunday was a family day. We went to my dad's house and drove his little boat around the harbor with my family. It was a super enjoyable day, just relaxing outside. It's a bummer that I don't get to do that as much as I want to, but it is what it is, and things will get better eventually. So, what's the most problematic thermostat that I've had to replace? John Deere fan. I will tell you exactly what thermostat that was. So, Linux Industries came out with their, I wouldn't even call it a thermostat. It was like a human interface for their, DaveNet, I think is what it was called. I don't know. It was their I can't think of the name of it right now. There was a name of a thermostat when the Linux Voyagers came out originally in the late 90s, early 2000s. They have a building automation system. Basically, it was their own proprietary control, and it had a giant touchscreen. Those things drove me nuts because I wasn't very familiar. Someone in the chat will say what it was called, but I wasn't very familiar with control systems, and it kind of threw me for a loop and would always confuse me. So eventually we pulled that whole system out. Again, it's driving me nuts that I can't remember the name of it. You had to log into it with a computer. You had to buy a silly little chingus that you plugged into a phone jack, and whatever. It was a pain in the butt. But those things threw me for a loop basically because they were very confusing to me. But it was basically one single human interface, very similar to no, it wasn't the Prodigy system, but it was very similar to like a tracer system for a train or something like that. They just threw me for a loop. So those are probably the most confusing thermostats that I ever had to deal with. Let me see what else. What made me step out and decide to work for myself? DG. So I started working for my father, and we partnered together many years ago, and we run the company together now. So I never officially went out on my own. I kind of grew up in a family business and kind of took the reins and have been running with him for a while now. So probably not the best person. Alex, you'll move to California and be able to train. Oh, I got you, man. I can't train people for free. You can't do that in California. Have I seen lots of compressor issues on Hoshizaki R290 units? No, I can't say that I've worked on any Hoshizaki R290 units. I've only worked on a handful of Hoshizaki regions in general. I probably have 3 or 4 Hoshizaki regions out there at a couple of my restaurants, but I really don't get that many service calls on them. In the very beginning, I did get a lot of service calls, but the main units that I work on right now, I work on a lot of Hvacr units, a lot of Delfield units. Hvacr and Delfield are the mains, and then I have a lot of custom units, true refrigeration units, but not very many Hoshizaki units of all things. So, all right, let's see what else we got in here. Dion, again, thank you very much. I really appreciate. No, I'm not answering any calls or anything, but I really appreciate that super chat. That's awesome, bud. What is the step bit thing called that I use to flow nitrogen? It's made by JB Industries. Just look up JB Industries nitrogen, I don't know, tool or something like that, and it'll probably come up. I don't think you can find it at True Tech Tools, but I'm sure you can. If you look on one of my past videos, I think there's probably a link in the show notes and stuff like that. I don't know the exact name of it right now. Let me see what else we got in here right now. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get to my list of things. Does it cool down over here in October? Yeah, September, October is kind of the start of our fall, towards the end of September, beginning of October. So we're already getting the cooler nights, but we still have hot days. So I think next week we still have a few really hot days of about 102, 103 degrees. And that's actually not even very hot for us. 121 was our high this summer. So we'll still have a few 100-degree days next week, but we still have really cool nights. Before we'll basically have a wind event that we get every year called the Santa Ana winds. Up north in Northern California, they call them the Diablo winds. But we'll get that wind event come down here in Southern California. And once that wind event passes, that's when it'll start to really get cold outside, and then the season just completely changes. And when I say really cold, guys, in California, we don't know what cold is, okay? So our extreme low, like the extreme low we'll ever get where I live, is about 34 degrees, but that will only happen for maybe like 4 days of the whole winter, okay? Our normal average winter temperatures are about 50 to 55 degrees. And that's what we consider cold. We get our UGG boots on, our beanies, our hoodies, and we basically just survive for a month and a half, and then we have warm weather come January, February. So, all right. Any experience with Trenton ESP Plus evaps? If so, how do I like them? No, Mark, but I hear a lot of good things about the ESP Plus evaporators. I will say that Trenton, the really cool thing is that they did partner with, or at least they had, Ketatherm. I'm sorry, brain fart for a minute, but Ketatherm, who makes the Evap Plus efficiency controllers and the Temp Plus defrost controllers, they actually designed and programmed the boards for the ESP Trenton evaporators. So it is actually a Ketatherm system basically, and you can hook up to it with the Ketatherm dashboard. It's a really cool setup. I've not worked with one myself, but they do look really cool. I'm very impressed with a lot of the Trenton equipment. I was recently doing some work at a stainless steel shop, and they had a bunch of Trenton condensing units, and I was just admiring like the quality that they took to design the systems and the usability and all that stuff. So very, very nice equipment. I'd love to start working with a little bit more. Unfortunately, dealing with the chain restaurants that I deal with, we don't get to sell equipment very often, so it is what it is. But all right, I'm going to go to my list of things to talk about here real quick. Let me see what we got here. I see a bunch of orders coming through for shirts and stuff right now. Thank you guys very much for the support. Okay. If you guys don't already know, you guys can purchase merch, hats, and shirts on hvacrvideos.com. I have all different types of shirts, different colors, I should say, white, gray, black. This shirt is one of them that I'm wearing right now. I'll show you guys the design on the back real quick for those that don't know. So it says Big Picture Diagnoses on the back. And then the hats, they're just a black hat. Let me grab one real quick. So the hats are a black, like, the best way to describe them, because I can see light through them, but they're not a trucker hat. They're not mesh, but they're breathable. Black underbill so your fingers don't get them dirty. Flex fit. They do not have my logo on them. They just say HVACR. I purposely did that, guys, because I didn't want you guys to be wearing my logo at work and possibly have a conflict of interest or anything like that. So check it out on the website, okay? That's all the plugs I'm going to give to myself, so thanks for sticking through that, okay? Let me see what else. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get to my list. So John had asked me, do I mainly use my phone for Measure Quick? Great question, John. So I'm going to cover a few questions with that one right now. So a lot of people ask me all the time when I'm showing the digital software that I'm using, when I'm checking out an air conditioner or refrigeration system, I typically use the app called Measure Quick. It is free on the App Store. You guys can download it from the Android or Apple Store. It's got tons of free stuff inside there, okay? Now, I will preface that by saying I have talked to Jim Bergman. He's the creator of that app, and he owns the company. And he's made that app completely free, and he's promised that the app will stay free. Now, there is some premium versions that you do have to pay for, but understand something. He has put countless hours and money into that app, okay? So check it out and do me a favor. If you guys can, give Jim some support, okay? Within the app, you guys can buy something called Qubits. Qubits allows you access to the premium services within the app. I have no affiliation with Measure Quick, by the way, guys, okay? And let me just preface this, okay? But do me a favor, if you guys can, support Jim by buying some Qubits, okay? It's amazing that he made that app and we have access to it. It works with almost all the smart tools, okay? It works with Fieldpiece products, majority of the Testo products, works with iManifold products. You guys just go to Measure Quick. I'm sure measurequick.com maybe or something, and you can probably find out all the stuff you can do with it. It's a great app. Let me see. Yeah, if I was a smart broadcaster, Ike, I probably would have transitioned to my rear cam, but I'm not very good at this whole streaming thing, so it is what it is. Let's see. With my Measure Quick, I mainly do use a tablet, okay? You can give access to, or you can access it from your phone, but here's the problem. I can bring it up on my phone. In fact, I'll bring it up right now. I'm not going to show you guys a screenshot, but I mean, it's popping up right now. It says Measure Quick, and then it's going to load. It's going to ask me if I want to update, and it's going to pull up a manifold set. Okay, now I purposely don't use my phone very often for Measure Quick because there's nothing worse, in my opinion, than being connected to Measure Quick and you're trying to diagnose something in a phone call or an email or a notification comes through and it just messes everything up. Okay, so I use Measure Quick on a separate tablet. I have a very inexpensive tablet. It's a Samsung Galaxy Tab A. It might have cost me $200. I put an OtterBox case on it, and I leave it in my tool bag. I mean, don't get me wrong, $200 is a lot of money to me, but at the same time, if I lose that tablet, it's not a big deal. That's why I purposely don't buy a very expensive iPad or anything. I just buy a very inexpensive one. The Tab A works perfect. The software runs Measure Quick. I have no issues whatsoever, and I'm not concerned. If I lost my tablet, it would not be the end of the world. Now, if I go and buy a very, very expensive tablet, $800-900, then yeah, I'm going to be bummed out if I damage it or lose it or something like that. So I use it on a tablet. Let me see what else. Ooh, I had a really good question from someone. They said they noticed that I'm always preaching about commercial refrigeration for air conditioning technicians by Dick Wers. It is a book. If you guys haven't read the book, go out and order it. In the show notes of this video is an Amazon link for that book. Check it out. I met the gentleman that wrote the book. He's a very nice, humble dude. His name is Dick Wers. It's an amazing book, and it's designed for refrigeration technicians that, or HVAC technicians that want to become refrigeration technicians. Okay, it's a great, great book. So, Ian had, the question was asked about that book. Forgive me, the person didn't give me his name, but he wrote in there, hey, I read in the book that you should have on most walk-in coolers, you should have a 10-degree design TD, okay? The evaporator TD is the difference between the suction saturation temperature of the refrigerant in the middle of the evaporator and the box temperature, okay? So he says he notices that in my videos when I'm working on refrigeration systems that I don't always have a perfect 10-degree TD, And he said, I don't seem to be too concerned about that. And he was kind of curious because the way that he reads it in the book is that you should have a 10-degree TD. He is correct, okay? And I've said this many times before. I believe it was Jim Bergman that made this comment. If you don't know what your refrigerant pressures or temperature should be before you apply your service gauges, you absolutely have no business putting your gauges on the system, okay? But what happens if the pressures or the saturation temperatures don't always meet, and why would something like that happen? Well, you have to understand something. Refrigeration systems are often designed in a lab under perfect working conditions, 50% relative humidity, whatever it is, whatever they designed it at. But, let's just say they designed it at 50% relative humidity, 37-degree box temp, 27-degree saturation temperature, but we don't always get that condition, okay? Oftentimes, people have done things to the system. The expansion valves aren't adjusted correctly. So, as a technician, I kind of accept some variable numbers in there, and it's just something that I've learned to deal with, okay? It's very rare that you get a system that is operating 100% to design factory conditions. The more you work in air conditioning or refrigeration, you're going to learn that. Here in Southern California, we have an air conditioner that was designed to deliver 90,000 BTUs at 50% relative humidity. But guess what? We don't ever run 50% relative humidity here in California. In the summertime, we run about 10 to 12% relative humidity. It's extremely dry. That's going to affect the delivered capacity of your equipment, okay? So you're not always going to see those perfect numbers, all right? Same thing with the design temperatures, okay? They don't typically ship a Carrier or a Lennox package unit that was designed for 125 degree ambient temperature, 130 degree ambient temperature, right? If you look on the weather maps, it doesn't say that it ever gets 130 degrees in some of these cities, but guess what? On a roof deck, it does. On a roof deck, it's 10 to 15 degrees hotter than it is downstairs on the street level, okay? So when we get 120 degree ambient, sometimes it can be up to 130 degree ambient air pulling into that condenser. They weren't designed for that. Therefore, they're not always going to deliver that exact number and those exact pressures or whatever, okay? Same thing goes for refrigeration. So it's one of those things that you have to learn, like, okay, I'm close enough. My TD's about, 20 degrees or 15 degrees or whatever. Everything else is performing pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and let it go. So that's why I don't always have the perfect pressures. It's just one of those things that you learn to deal with. All right. Any news on when the winter hats are going to be out? So yeah, I got an email from the guy that I'm ordering the hats from today. The beanies. I ordered 2 styles of beanies, and I'm going to be honest with you. One style I absolutely don't like. He sent a picture, and he's sending the actual samples to me by Wednesday, but one design is not happening because it does not meet my standards. But the other design looks all right. So once I get it in my hands and I make sure it's okay, then I'll definitely order that one design, and we'll have those hopefully within a couple weeks. Let's see. Let me see what else we got going on in the chat. I know I missed a lot of different things here. Would I rather use an analog meter or a digital? Eric, I have kind of grown up on digital, and I do just fine with digital, but I will say that there's some things about an analog that I would appreciate a little bit more. Depending on, if you get a very high quality analog meter, I would tend to trust that a little bit more than some of the cheaper low end digital meters. But for the most part in what we do, and I know Eric, you kind of do the same thing that I do, the restaurant refrigeration, convenience store refrigeration, and air conditioning, just a decent field piece or a decent fluke clamp meter, I do just fine with it. I like the digital ones. I mean, there's some things. I mean, I shouldn't say that I never used analog. When I was coming up working for my dad, he had a digital voltmeter, but we actually didn't have clamp meters back then, or they weren't readily available and cheap enough. So we still had an amp clamp that was analog. And so, yes, I actually did learn on an analog amp clamp, which is very interesting. I know that they say that they're more accurate, but the scales are really hard to read. So you never saw the exact point, the decimals that you see on digital. And when I say accurate, I should say more reliable, I should say. So, you get into a real nice digital meter and it's definitely more accurate and more reliable. But once you get to the low end ones, a lot of things start to affect it. And I definitely had a lot of the cheap low end digital meters in the very beginning, but digital meters have come a long way. And I guess I would probably say that I prefer the digital now for sure. So, All right, let me see what else. Have I been using the field piece manometer probes? Thoughts, Jason? I have a couple sets of the field piece manometer probes. They're great probes. I do like them. Every time they come out with a new digital probe or a new digital tool, it's really cool. There's some things that you have to learn to work through with the digital, because what you don't realize is the tolerances that they have and different things like that. You know, same thing goes for like a micron gauge. You know, once you get a micron gauge and you realize the nicer ones that you buy, they're a lot more accurate, they're a lot more finicky, they start to show more problems. It's things that you have to learn to deal with when you learn to use a lot of the digital stuff. But I definitely like the field piece manometers, and I would highly suggest you consider purchasing them. I have also heard equally good feedback about the Testo manometers. I personally have never used any of the Testo products, so I can't say anything bad about them, but I've heard a lot of people saying they like them. So food for thought. Let's see what else we got in here. Is a bad time of year to get hired as an apprentice with an HVAC company? Greg, it's not necessarily a bad time of year. It's in general, it's just a bad time right now because of the whole COVID situation. Coming into the fall is typically in Southern California when we slow down a wee bit. But there's definitely still companies out there that are going to hire you for sure. So let me see what else we got in here. What am I missing? All right. Will I be making a new van update video? Unknown. You know, it's a possibility. It's just one of those things I haven't put as a big priority. So I definitely do things differently than most people. I don't treat this like a business. I just kind of do my own thing and kind of beat to the tune of my own drum when it comes to these videos. So, you know, when I get to it, I'll get to it. All right, let me get to my list of things to talk about here. Oh, great question. So Ian had asked me, and this is a really cool question, Ian. Ian said, hey, you know what? He goes, he's having a hard time, and he wanted to know if I had any tips on how to wire up 115 volt, 230 volt single phase systems that have starting components. And what he means by that is oftentimes you'll come across a system that doesn't have a schematic and you don't know exactly where to wire the relay, the start winding, you know, who knows. Okay. And that's a great question. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, Ian. Okay. I don't have a lot of that stuff stored in my memory. I can't look at a compressor and say, oh yeah, the relay goes here, you know, this wire goes on this spot on the relay. I don't have that, okay? But the really cool thing that we have now, Ian, is these phones. These phones are really smart. You can pull up a schematic of anything you're working on. If you just do enough research, you can find it, okay? Even if you can't find the exact system you're working on, you can find the model number of the compressor and you can pull up a schematic for that compressor, okay? You also need to know how to find out which one's your start winding, you know, and you can ohm those windings out. And that's a really cool, I think I have a couple videos on it. I don't know if it's titled anything, but if you want to know more about starting components and finding out which one is common start and run, a really best place to go check out is my buddy Brian's website, hvacrschool.com. Again, no affiliation with Brian other than just being another dude on the internet. But he has lots of great information, and he has a searchable document place or whatever where you can find write-ups and different things like that people have written, kind of like white pages. I've written a few for him. I believe Eric Melee in here has written a few for him. I know Eric just did his podcast. But Brian has lots of great information. So if you want a visual on how to figure out the windings on a compressor, which one's common start and run, go check out Brian's website. It's really, it'll help you out a lot. Okay. Can I recommend a set of hoses for S-man gauges so you can get a micron, so you can use micron gauge and charge? HVACJ, you're pushing my buttons right there. Okay, so the best hoses to use for your S-man manifold is just any 1/4-inch hoses you can find. I'm not a fan of using the micron gauge in the manifold. I'm not saying that I don't ever do it, but your best bet is to buy a standalone micron gauge, okay? The micron gauge in the manifold does work, but it's not going to be as accurate as if you had a standalone micron gauge, okay? The reason why is because the placement of the micron gauge in the manifold and the fact that the manifold itself is susceptible to a lot of oil being inside of it, and the oil can actually contaminate the micron gauge within the manifold. So, do I suggest that people don't ever buy the manifolds with the micron gauges in them? No, not necessarily, because there's a time and place to use the micron gauge in the manifold. But you want to buy a separate, like the Appion has a micron gauge. Blue Vac is my favorite micron gauge, and it's a standalone micron gauge, okay? So if you're curious, if you want to know more information about it, feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, and I can share a little bit more. Let me see what else. Do I use compression ratio when troubleshooting? If so, how? Lorenzo, no, not very much at all. Treating burnouts, cleaning. How am I treating burnouts, cleaning evacuation, treatments, purging, flu? I don't use any flushes myself. I don't treat a burnout other than opening the system up, purging it with nitrogen. I cut it in as many spots as possible, blow out the system, try to get out any sludge and any oil. And then I'm going to put high acid liquid line filter dryers and suction line filter dryers. And then I'm probably going to go back and return and replace those dryers once or twice after the burnout, depending on how severe it is. Okay. I've made a personal choice to not really use flushes or neutralizers or anything like that. It's just something that I just really don't think that you should be putting things into the system that didn't come from in the system, basically. When it was designed or wasn't designed for it. But I will preface that with saying most of my career, I used acid neutralizer, acid away, acid scavenger, all these different things, flushes and different things. And I never actually saw a problem from any of those, but I've just made a conscious decision to not do it anymore. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question for you. Let me see what else. Will I be going to the AHR Expo this year? I highly, highly doubt that the AHR Expo is actually going to happen. If it does, there's a possibility that I would go, but I'm going to be honest with you. Most of the people, I think even if they have the expo, I think they're going to have a hard time filling it because everybody's very skeptical. So I'd be very surprised to see that they actually end up doing the show. I know they haven't officially canceled it, but I would be very surprised if they actually do the show. Have I had issues with the field piece probes? Frank, I don't think I really have. I've had issues with other field piece products, and field piece has a great, great warranty department, and they always take care of me with that stuff. But I can't say that I've ever had issues with the probes, and I have quite a few probes. And no, I can't say that I have. So, all right, let's see what else we got in here. Do I change a TXV on a burnout system? Jason, you know, that's kind of a hard thing to give a blanket answer to, but for the most part, I would say yes. If I do have a severely burnt out system, I'm probably going to quote a new TXV with the compressor, but that doesn't happen every single time. It really depends on how difficult it's going to be to change the TXV, how severe the burn is the burn, you know, is there burnt oil in the evaporator and the compressor or in the condenser, or is it contained to just the compressor? It really depends on each situation, okay? Let me see what else. If I don't use R12, RX11, what do I use to get out of oil out of a logged evaporator? Honestly, I've never really had the need to get oil out of a logged evaporator. I do have a system out there that I made a video on. The customer still hasn't approved us, so it's still running with an oil logged evaporator. If I was to do it, more than likely, I would drop the evaporator and blow it out. But I mean, most of the time when you pull an evaporator, it's not really going to be worth pulling an evaporator for the most part. The customer, they can get them so cheap now, you probably end up just replacing it. So, I mean, if I suspect a little bit of oil logging, then I'm going to try to go ahead and correct the superheat issues, go ahead and add a suction line P-trap to the system, give it a couple days of runtime, and come back and monitor the oil levels again if it has like an oil sight glass or something like that. But I really haven't had very much experience with complete system failures because of oil logged evaporators. It's very, very, I think I might have had it 1 or 2 times, and each time they just changed the entire, you know, all the equipment basically. Let me see what else we got going on in here. What's my company name? Marvin, you know, even though I know you guys can see that in my videos every once in a while and stuff like that, I really don't make my company name like completely public. It's not like it's a big hidden thing. Most people can probably figure out my company name, but I'd rather just kind of keep it out of the public's eye if I can, just to eliminate unnecessary, unwanted attention. If people are interested in working with me or different things like that, send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com and we can talk a little bit more. Have I had any? I already answered that question. How do I troubleshoot an? I already answered that question. How do you troubleshoot an oil log evaporator? Oil log evaporators are one of the hardest things, in my opinion, to go ahead and diagnose. And to be honest with you, majority of the time when I've diagnosed an oil log evaporator, it's a very educated guess because I haven't been able to figure out anything else that's going on. Something's wrong here. I can't figure out exactly what's up. I'm not getting proper performance out of my evaporator. I have low suction gas pressure coming back. It's not a TXV issue. different things like that. But oil logged evaporators have always been very difficult for me to diagnose. So it's not really something I can tell you like, hey, these things mean oil logged. No, not necessarily. So I don't have to answer this, but is there any equipment that I absolutely hate to work on? Well, Peter, I kind of made it very, very public that I am not a fan of York package units lately because of their ridiculously stupid placement of screws and just general horrible design of their systems. But that's my personal preference. It doesn't mean that York is a horrible system. You know, I imagine that there's people out there that say that Lennox and Carrier are the worst air conditioners too, but I work on those every day, so I know their quirks and features and know, you know, what to look for, and I'm very comfortable working on those systems. I think majority of the time when we as technicians say like this is the worst piece of product ever, oftentimes it's because we're unfamiliar with that product and we're just not comfortable with it. How can I tell if a compressor thermal lockout is bad? Well, HVACJ, if it doesn't reset, I mean, in my situation on my live stream last week, it took forever, like 2 hours for that thing to reset. I've never had a thermal overload take that long to reset on a compressor. But for the most part, I mean, if you can't get it to reset, then that's what's really going to tell you if it's bad. Thermal overloads, if they're internal, it's not really something you can fix. They're bad, they're bad. So let's see what else we got in here. What am I missing here? Let me see. What am I missing? I already answered that question. Okay, so I'm going to get to my list of things to talk about. Oh, great question. Scott had asked me how hard it would be for him to transfer, basically. Currently, he works in refrigeration, but he works on domestic appliances. So he does like home residential refrigerator repair and stuff like that. And he kind of wants to transition into commercial refrigeration. And he was kind of curious how difficult the transition would be. Well, I mean, it's really not going to be that difficult. The troubleshooting steps that you go through on the domestic refrigerators are pretty much the same on the commercial. It's just the commercials are bigger systems. So I work on light commercial, restaurant refrigeration, air conditioners, different things like that. If I was to transition into supermarket refrigeration, I would probably struggle a bit, but I mean, I would get the I understand the concept, so it wouldn't be that hard to figure it out. So if you're working on the domestic side and you understand the sequence of operation, you understand the refrigeration cycle, you understand how to use a meter and to ohm things out, to check for voltages, you can relay that into light commercial refrigeration or heavy commercial or even industrial. So it's just having to learn. There's different control strategies, different defrost strategies, different things like that. So interestingly enough, the podcast that Eric Melee was on, sorry, Eric, if I'm pronouncing your last name wrong, but he just did a podcast recently with Joe Shearer and Brian Orr on HVAC School, and they were actually talking about refrigeration. They were talking about a lot of domestic refrigeration because that's Joe Shearer has some experience with that. So go check out that podcast. It was very interesting, and it kind of gives you an idea of the differences and the transition from the domestic stuff to the refrigeration, the light commercial stuff that Eric does. So it's a pretty cool podcast. I just listened to it today. Let me see what else. Joe had asked me, and this was actually from last week, and this was a great question. Joe asked me, why do I share so much of my knowledge, right? I don't necessarily have a lot of knowledge, guys. Okay, I share my mistakes for the most part. But he had asked me, you know, what am I afraid of sharing that information as meaning, am I afraid that someone's going to take my job if I share too much of my information that I have in my head? No, I'm absolutely not afraid of that. There's always going to be refrigeration work. We are so desperate for technicians right now. You do not have to worry about being replaced unless you just generally suck as an HVAC service technician, okay? If that's the case, then you probably don't have a lot of information to share, okay? Although that's arguable about myself because I do suck at certain times. But anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But no, I'm not afraid to share the little bit of knowledge that I have at all because I'm going to be employed if I want to be for the rest of my life in HVAC. And there's always going to be a job for me one way or another. So not worried about that at all. Let me get to the chat and see what I'm missing in here. I know there's a lot of stuff I missed, so don't hesitate to repost. Have I done supermarket refrigeration? No, I have not done supermarket refrigeration. I have absolutely no experience in it. Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate it, bud. All right. Let me see what else. I already answered that one. Have I had accidents dealing with R290 equipment, Alex. No, I've never had an accident dealing with R290 equipment. It's really not that different. You don't need to be afraid of R290. Yes, it is a hydrocarbon. It is a flammable refrigerant. It's unodorized propane. You cannot smell it, but it's not that big of a deal. It really isn't. Just purge the system before you don't make it out to be a bigger deal than it is, basically. Before you open the system up, even if it was flat on refrigerant, you purge it with nitrogen. Before you light your torch, you purge it with nitrogen, even if you already did it. That's the biggest thing, okay? Try to cut out as many components as you can. Obviously, you got to sweat the components back in or braze them back in, but just be cautious. Purge with nitrogen while you're doing so. Have an electronic leak detector that can sense combustible gases while you're working on it. And that's pretty much it. Get a really good scale that can read in grams. Your best bet is going to be able to have a scale that reads grams and does small enough increments that you can charge those systems. The charge limitation on R290 right now, and the Coke nose has already started, is like 5.5 ounces or something like that. So I think it's 500 grams or 400 grams, or it's such a small amount. So you're dealing with tiny, tiny amounts of refrigerant. Let me see what else. What am I missing in here? Yeah, it's easy peasy, just like Good Riddance said. It's not a big deal, okay? We deal with the torch every day. We braze lines shut. So dealing with the combustible gas, just use a little bit more brain power just to make sure that you're not, lighting the system, trying to unsweat a component when it's full of gas. I mean, different things like that. So you don't got to sweat it too much, so. All right. Do I like using or working on 448A refrigerant when retrofitting from R22? Miguel. So 448A refrigerant. Okay, let's start this off with saying there is a bunch of different flavors of refrigerants out there, okay? Ironically enough, my buddy Ralph is in here right now. If any of you guys has refrigerant related questions, Ralph is actually the man to ask them. I'm going to post his email in here right now. He works for Honeywell Refrigerants, okay? But in general, there's so many different flavors of refrigerants out there. First off, biggest advice I can give to everybody that's working in refrigeration is stop being fixated on a pressure number, okay? Don't worry about pressures, okay? Pay attention to temperatures, saturation temperatures. Once you understand saturation temperatures and understand where they should be, it doesn't matter what flavor of refrigerant you have, because every different refrigerant is going to have a different pressure temperature relationship. It's going to have a different pressure at 90 degrees than the next one or the next one, okay? But if you understand the saturation temperatures and you understand that on this walk-in cooler, in a perfect world, you should have 25-degree condensing temp over ambient on the roof and 10-degree evaporator temperature under ambient downstairs, then you don't need to be fixated on a pressure number when you're trying to look for a refrigerant pressure. You look at the temperatures, okay? Assuming that you have a solid column of liquid going to your expansion valve, okay? So that's the biggest thing. So do I have a problem converting 448A on any system or converting to 448A? No, okay? Understand that you need to follow the installation practices that the manufacturers recommend. Best practices. There's other ways to go about it too, and Ralph will help you out with that too, but there's best practices is if you're going to do a conversion to 448A, whether it be R22, whether it be 404, is to read the installation instructions and make sure that the system is adequately sized and has the right components installed in it, okay? Make sure that I'm sorry, someone had just tried to call me right now, so it kind of confused me. But make sure that you're following all the manufacturer's installation instructions, especially if you're converting from 404A to 448A and you're not changing all the equipment. I suggest that you get in there and change the nozzle on the distributor for the expansion valve. Make sure that you replace the expansion valve, put the proper power head element on it, but also the orifice inside the valve. You can get by with using existing valves and different things like that, but you want to follow best practices, okay? But just read the installation instructions. That's the easiest way, and focus on the temperatures and not the pressure number. Let me see what I got going on in here. I appreciate that super sticker, Tommy. That's awesome. Thank you very much, bud. Okay. Let me see what else I got going on here. How long is this stream? Typically it goes for about an hour. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer. It just depends on when I run out of steam, basically. Let's see what else we got in here. Have I ever worked on a Linux Prodigy board with a length of listy alarms? John, yeah, I have very many times. What I find when I have, doesn't matter what circuit board I'm working on, Manitowoc Ice Machine, Linux package units, or anything like that, is just kind of look for the first 3 alarms and start there. When you have a giant list of alarms, you're going to get just completely deer in the headlights kind of a look and get completely confused. So pay attention to probably the most recent alarms and start from scratch. Look at the basics. Are the coils clean? Is the belt tight? Is the refrigerant in the lines? Different things like that. And then start troubleshooting from that point. Let's see what else we got in here. Yeah, do me a favor, guys. Hit the thumbs up. I don't know what the most alarms that I come across, but hit the thumbs up button on the stream, guys. It really, really helps the stream when you guys give it a thumbs up. So please do so. Okay. Have I used TDX20? Lorenzo, no, I have not used Blue On refrigerants. I have no experience with it. I cannot say that there's anything bad about the refrigerants because I have personally not used it. I will, however, say that I'm not a fan of their marketing, but that's just because I hold a grudge and they kind of pissed me off. But I cannot honestly say that they have a horrible product because I have not used it. Okay, so I can't talk trash about their product. What is my opinion on the best R22 retrofit refrigerants on a cap tube and TXV, and why? Honestly, I have no experience using a retrofit refrigerant on a cap tube and a TXV for R22. If I was dealing with an air conditioning system, I would probably go ahead and go with 407C, but that would require an oil change. As far as the best refrigerant for a cap tube, that's going to be kind of a struggle using a replacement gas for R22 on a cap tube. I mean, to be honest with you, is it really worth putting that much effort into a cap tube system? Cap tube systems are usually very small. It might be in the customer's best interest to do a system retrofit and replace the evaporators and the condenser and convert to a new refrigerant in general, as opposed to using a drop-in or replacement refrigerant for a cap tube system. But feel free to reach out to my buddy Ralph, Honeywell Refrigerants. I'm sure he can help you out a little bit more. Juan, thank you so very much for that super chat. That is awesome, man. I really appreciate it. How different are ammonia systems and refrigerant systems? Well, ammonia is a refrigerant, so be cautious about that. I do not have any experience with ammonia, so I'm not going to start running my mouth about the main differences. I will say there's a couple things that I do know are different. Number one, you're dealing with a highly, highly toxic gas. Okay. So there's a lot of safety practices that you have to worry about. I will say that the equipment typically is much, much bigger. Okay. Ammonia is typically on heavy industrial. You're not going to see it on very much small stuff. Although I do know that they did use ammonia on little domestic RV refrigerators many years ago. I don't know if they still do it or not, but I have no experience with ammonia though. So that's about the end of my knowledge with ammonia. Okay. So I'm not going to really answer any more than that, just with saying that there's some usually larger components and a lot of safety protocols that you have to follow. Let me see what else. What do we got in here? How long does it normally take to get a replacement part from my suppliers? It really depends on which supplier and what we're dealing with. Right now, yeah, we've definitely got a shortage and parts are taking a lot longer to get for sure. So, but it just depends on every manufacturer. Let's see. Let me get to my list of things to talk about. Have I ever worked on Pebble and or Nugget ice machines? Yeah, I have a lot of experience on Follett Symphony ice machines. I did a brief stint for about 5 or 6 years working for a major hospital chain, doing a lot of Follett ice machines. So it's really nothing too difficult. Just got to understand the sequence of operation. I really liked working on the little Follett Symphony things. Those things were actually rather nice. They were time consuming to properly clean them, and they had their own little quirks and stuff. But in general, the Follett machines were rather fun machines to work on. Very easy to work on and easy to service. The things that I really liked about the Follett Symphony lines, those are countertop and sometimes wall-mounted hospital ice machines, or sometimes for restaurants, was that they had replacement skids. So if you had a compressor problem or something like that, you could literally slide the condensing unit off, and you could usually keep a replacement skid down in the engineering lab and go get another one and slide it up there and have the machine operational and go work on the skid downstairs while you had a replacement machine up there running. So I really did used to dig that about the Follett machines. J&J Services, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. That is awesome. I really, really appreciate that. Okay. it was really hard to find any information. And that's the whole point, is just trying to share my knowledge to try to make it not so difficult for people to find information. So that's why I try to do this. What am I missing in here right now? Okay. Are condenser fan motors regular motors, or are they water resistant? It really depends. H. Solely, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. That is awesome. So, you know, I can't say that every condenser fan motor is water resistant or not, but I will say that a lot of the case motors that manufacturers are making for like the supermarket systems, the little ECM motors, they are water resistant, especially the evaporator ones. But I don't know about condenser fan motors. Typically, they're not water resistant in my experience, but maybe someone can correct me on that. Let's see what else. 500 grams. There you go. That's the charge limitation on R290. Thank you, Ralph. Let me see what else. Does that R22 replacement actually work? Blue on Avery. I have no experience with it. Okay. I've heard conflicting information from reputable sources that it's not what it's cracked up to be, but I have no experience. So I can't say yes or no. So I've just heard good and bad from both sides. So how do I handle a system that does not specify what? Oh, great question. Jason Manning. How do I handle a system that does not specify what refrigerant is in the system? That is a common struggle, especially when you work on, and I deal with it in restaurants, when I take over restaurants and I go up to the roof, and this is the worst thing, okay? If you're a service technician and you're working in restaurants, Sin, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. If you're working in restaurants and you come up like on a new account, or you come up behind other companies and they're using different flavors of refrigerant in each air conditioner, that's a no-no. Okay. If you're going to use a R22 replacement, stick with it. Okay. Don't keep changing flavors from air conditioner to air conditioner on that roof, because that just gets to be a problem. Okay. It just makes for headaches. But if I walk up to a system and I suspect that it doesn't have the right refrigerant in it, or I don't know what refrigerant's in it, first off, if I don't think that there's been any retrofitting going on, what I'm going to do is pull up the compressor data. Okay. Look at the oil in the compressor. The oil is going to tell you a lot. Okay. If I'm walking up to a walk-in cooler that looks like it's probably 30 years old and it has mineral oil in it, guess what? More than likely, it's going to have R12 refrigerant, possibly R22. Okay. It wasn't until probably, I'd say, the mid 2000s, towards the late, mid 2000s, that, they started putting polyester oil in R22. So that was a pretty dead giveaway. Okay. But you also have to be careful, because there's some other oils that were transitioning between mineral and polyester. We had alkylbenzene oil, and then we have POV oil. That's a whole nother thing, but we can get into that. But look at the oil. That kind of gets you a ballpark. Okay. It doesn't necessarily always mean it's going to be something, because they can also have the wrong refrigerant in with that oil too. So be cautious about that. But look at the oil, look at the compressor data, look for any identifying tags, and then go downstairs to the evaporator, look at the data plate, and open up and look at the expansion valve. Pull up the data on the expansion valve. It's a Sporlan expansion valve. You can find out the power head data, find out what refrigerant it was designed for. Now, just because it was designed for a refrigerant, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the refrigerant in the system, okay? But you just got to kind of do some deductive reasoning looking at the system. Now, if you can't figure it out, you know, your best bet is to go ahead and recover the refrigerant and recharge it with fresh refrigerant that you know is the right refrigerant for the system. Okay. There's some other methods, especially on an air conditioner, that you can use, you know, do a standing pressure test and different things like that. But those can also be inaccurate. Got to be very cautious about doing standing pressure tests, because if the refrigerant is mixed or something, it can just give you mixed results. Okay. So look at the power head, look at the compressor data. If you can't figure it out from that, your best bet is to go ahead and recover the refrigerant and weigh a new fresh virgin refrigerant with whatever flavor it's supposed to be, basically. All right, let's see what else. Sin, again, thank you very much for that super chat. Let me see what I missed in here. Oh, really? I appreciate it, bud. Thank you. Really appreciate that. All right, let's see what I'm missing in here. Your favorite is the pink flavor. Yep. I'm going to throw Ralph's email in here one more time, because I know a lot of people are asking for it. I see information in there, so I'm going to post his email one more time. Anybody has questions, send Ralph an email, okay? All right, let's go into here. And have I used Trade Pro capacitors? Dragon, I can't say that I know what Trade Pro is. I'm not real focused on one particular capacitor brand. Yeah, I don't know what Trade Pro is. So Let me see what else we got here. Have I ever filled with the wrong refrigerant? Yes, I have, Storm. Have I ever put the wrong refrigerant in a system? Yeah, I have inadvertently put the wrong refrigerant in a system many times. And it sucks, but what you got to do is go ahead and recover the refrigerant and then go ahead and evacuate the system properly and put the right refrigerant back in it. I usually have realized it before it was became a problem, basically. I've also diagnosed systems that people have come behind me or before me and put the wrong refrigerant in there too. Done that many times. All right, let's see what else we got going on in here. What am I missing? Okay, I can't see that right now. And is 404A tanks usually orange? John Deere fan. They used to be the only orange tank out there, but now there's so many different refrigerants that they actually started changing the colors of refrigerants to all tan. So every refrigerant is going to have the same color cylinder now. So to my knowledge, 404A was an orangish color, 407C was an orangish color, and I'm sure there was a couple more that had an orangish color too. So they went away from that, and all the new refrigerants from this point forward that you're going to be getting are going to have the same color tanks. They're all like a tan grayish color. They all look like they're 409A or R12 tanks now. Let me see what else. Do I work on pumps like hot water heat exchangers? No, I do not. So, all right, I'm going to get to my list of things to talk about here again. Israel had asked me about the field piece probes and whether or not they were water resistant. Okay, so I do not know what Field Piece's official stance is on the probes, but I will say that I've accidentally sprayed down my probes with water before, and they still work to this day. Now, I'm not advocating that you go dunk your probes in water. Don't do that, okay? But I have inadvertently sprayed them down by accident, and they still work. But I wouldn't say that they're water resistant. No, I highly doubt that they have any water resistant rating, so... does the new tank color system make sense, or is it just more confusing? NT Secrets. It makes sense in the fact that they ran out of colors. Okay, so that totally makes sense. Now, is it confusing? Yeah, it's going to be confusing. But I mean, most service technicians have a smart brain, and they can simply look on the tank and say, hey, this is 404A, you know, because it's labeled on there. But you have to understand, there's literally so many different refrigerants out there that they no longer have enough colors to keep bringing in a new color. So that's why they had to do this. So that way people weren't looking for an orange tank and then grabbing 407C when they're working on 404. So it was easier just to make everything one color and go from there. All right. Let me see what else I got in here. So in my recent videos, I really didn't talk too much about those, but in my recent video, I was working on an ice machine and I used an aftermarket fan cycle control. Okay, when I did that, what I found was that we had a Manitowoc ice machine that had a failed fan cycle control. Those of you that work on Manitowoc ice machines, you know that we have a big problem with fan cycle controls in them. They were encapsulated little peanut controls that twisted on or didn't twist on, they were brazed on, and the height failure rate on them was ridiculous. When the machines, my personal opinion is, when the machines are out of warranty, do your customer a service like I did in mine and put in a Johnson Control adjustable pressure control. Pretty much it'll last, as long as there's no major issues with rub outs and different things like that, it'll last longer than the machine. They won't have any more problems with them. The little peanut controls are not good, and I will give Manitowoc a little bit of credit. Majority of the time, if I had to guess why the little factory OEM controls fail so much, is because of the lack of preventative maintenance. Okay. A lot of customers don't maintain their equipment enough. They get dirty condensers. The condensing temps rise. The system runs hot. The fan motors struggle. They're trying to pull air through dirty coils. The fan motors overamp. They have low voltage coming into the building that causes arcing in the contacts inside the pressure control, causes them to stick or get stuck open, different things like that. So if in a perfect world, if we had properly conditioned power, if we had properly maintained equipment, I probably would argue that those controls would not fail as much, okay? But there's not enough tolerance, in my opinion, in the design of the control to handle dirty condensers, low voltage, different stuff like that. So that's my personal reason as to why I use the aftermarket control in there. I had a question that was sent through email before the stream, and someone asked if I would consider becoming a teacher. That's kind of an interesting subject because I have thought about it, and I've talked to local community colleges too. But I'm going to kind of go out on a limb here and give a political, or not a political, but I'm going to give my personal opinion. teachers in general, they don't get paid enough, okay, when it comes to HVAC school. When you think about it, you've got a teacher that's making, 60 grand a year. Don't get me wrong, that's money, but for an experienced service technician, you can make more than that out in the field. And I think that in the schools, my personal opinion is that they have too many teachers. They have a lot of good teachers too. Let me preface this, there is good teachers out there. But unfortunately, I think everybody can agree there's a lot of bad teachers out there too. Okay. And the bad teachers, they give a bad name to everybody. But I don't think there's enough money in teaching to bring good quality service technicians into the teaching classroom to be able to have a career teaching, basically. Okay. It's just kind of a bummer. So no, I mean, I would love to teach. It sounds kind of fun, but the money's not there. That's just the sad fact. So I hate to say that, but that's how it is. So I've had some, I see some questions about 427A. So I use 427A. I used it on three different installs, maybe 4. One of them was horribly unsuccessful. Okay. Now, to be fair to 427A, I'm going to tell you something. This supply house was part of the reason why I had such an epic failure with 427A. I was sold a bill of goods with the 427A. I was told that it was the best replacement for R22, and there was no oil change necessary. Okay. I will argue that the manufacturer, when you get down into their tech data and you really read it, they have a few misleading, confusing things in their tech bulletin that tell you about the refrigerant. Okay. So let me give you this information. If you're dealing with any replacement refrigerant for any manufacturer, you need to pay attention to the installation instructions. Very much so. And in the installation instructions, if there's a sentence that says works best with polyester oil, that means change it to polyester oil. Okay. That doesn't mean try it and see what happens. So I was basically told that 427A was a great replacement refrigerant for R22. I used it on a Train 15-ton package unit that had a 15, actually it had a 10-ton and a 5-ton. So I had a Train 10-ton 3D scroll compressor. I put 427A in it, and it came back 2 days later to find a failed brand new compressor. What the heck? Called the supply house, told them I think we had a faulty compressor. They said no problem. They got me another compressor. We got the second compressor up on the roof, put that back in, faulty compressor 2 days later again. What I've since done is I've since done some research, and I figured out that when you're working with the Train 3D scroll compressors, they actually don't recommend converting the refrigerant dealing with some of these replacement refrigerants. You got to be very cautious about that, and don't trust the information that the supply house gives you when they tell you that it works perfectly with mineral oil, because that's a load of BS. Okay. I learned that one the hard way. We ate some crow on that one because I was the one that suggested we convert the refrigerant over. Part of it falls on the manufacturer because they have misleading information in their installation instructions, but a lot of it falls on the supply house too, because the supply house told me that it was good, but I guess most of the blame actually falls on myself because I blankly trusted the supply house. When the supply house said, yeah, this stuff works great, no problem, just remove the R22, put this stuff in and call it a day. It works perfect with mineral oil. And I listened to the supply house. Don't listen to supply houses. They're not technicians. Okay. They do their best. They listen to what other technicians tell them. Now, there's usually people at the supply house that do know what they're doing, but for the most part, the people at the counter, they're not the people that you need to be going to for technical support. I would highly suggest you call the manufacturer yourself. Also lean on the manufacturer of the equipment. Another interesting thing that I noted, and I don't know if it's still the same this day. Okay. Peter, thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. That is an amazing super chat, dude. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you so very much. But so, I have since learned if you look into Trains, and this was I did this about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I bet you it's still the same. But if you look into Train, the manufacturer of air conditioners, if you look into their information, they actually don't allow you to use alternative refrigerants in their systems. Okay. That is a very interesting thing because the Train supply houses sell alternative refrigerants. But if you look at their tech bulletins and look at the data, I've found some information in Trane's, product information that specifically says they will not warranty compressors that have used alternative refrigerants to what they were designed for. So be very cautious about using alternative refrigerants unless you talk to the manufacturer, understand how to properly convert the system, doing oil changes, changing the expansion valves, different things like that, changing all the seals. So always lean on the refrigerant manufacturers and the manufacturers of the equipment to make sure that it's compatible with these alternative refrigerants. Okay, so be very cautious about that. Let me see what else we got in here. Dion had asked me a question about different sets of refrigerant gauges. And he said, do I ever work with different sets of refrigerant gauges when I'm working with different refrigerants? No, I do not. Okay. So do I use a separate set for 410A? Do I use a separate set for R22? Do I use a separate set for 404? No, I do not. Okay. Don't worry about that stuff. Just purge your gauges after each use. Don't leave them full of oil and different things like that. But in the very beginning, when we had these new refrigerants come out, there was a lot of them that, there was a lot of fears about mixing the oils and the system was going to just completely explode on itself and all these problems. It's not the case. Relax. You don't have to worry so much about that. Just don't mix the refrigerants within the gauges. Okay. So I use one set of manifold gauges and I don't have multiple sets. So that's just my personal thing. Let me see what else we got in here. They will not warranty compressors with just dying. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Was there an alarm that I couldn't bypass? I don't know what you mean by that one, John Deere. Let me see what else we got in here. All right, guys. I am going to have to go ahead and end this because I actually just got a service call. So I'm going to have to go run a service call on an exhaust fan in a kitchen. I don't know if I can live stream it or not because it's going to be dark by the time I get there. So we'll have to see. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and end this right now. I'm going to cue up the outro music and we will catch you guys on the next one. Okay. Let me go ahead and cue this up. Transition this over.